Well, good morning, everyone. And usually the spotlight's on the stage, and so it's people up here that are trying to see the audience, but I can tell by a bunch of you, blocking. So I'm not too upset that you can't really see me, and I might just look like a silhouette. That works for me. So what's really great about our virtual platforms these days is that the three of us have been able to work quite closely together over the last couple of weeks, and that's something that is kind of an anomaly to my speaking career, is being able to meet the other speakers and get to know them a little bit better. I'm going to talk the first 10 minutes a little bit about our personal story, and the perspective that I'm hoping to lend to you today is from the producer perspective. And we're going to talk a lot about scale and scope today, and so I'm going to start on a local level, and then we're going to get broader and broader, and we'll kind of swing it back and forth a little bit. But we'd really like you to think about scope and scale today. So my name is Bluesette Campbell, and I currently live in the northwest region of Saskatchewan, which is only halfway up the province, but the northwest region in terms of where most of the people live. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our experience with the ebbs and flows, if you will, of the water cycle in our area in Saskatchewan. Last year, in 2020, we experienced an extreme drought, and this year in 2021, we have a pretty extreme flood, and then this year a pretty extreme drought. But just a little bit, there we go, about who I am and why I'm here today. I actually come from Montana, and I was raised on a sheep ranch in a way that I wouldn't really recommend to anyone, which was very difficult and a lot of crisis management. My mom wanted to raise her two daughters in a self-sufficient and sustainable manner, and she felt that that was the way to do it, but it was the school of hard knocks. And I did whatever I could to get away from that lifestyle. I went to school in New York, studied abroad, and tried to get away from my agrarian roots, but that didn't work. In 1996, I was offered a job as a manager of a sheep and cattle ranch, and it just so happened they said, but we'd like you to take some training, and that training was my first holistic management course with Roland Kroos. And it kind of caught on a little bit. That, and I also met my future husband, whose family has been deeply embedded in holistic management for quite some time. And it was the Campbell family and holistic management that allowed me to see a different way of living in agriculture that wasn't so difficult, and crisis management and financial hardship. My husband and I were married in 99, and were invited back to his family ranch. So we are third generation there. And we moved to Saskatchewan in 2002. And that's when I really began to feel like a holistic management practitioner. And over the course of the next 20 years, some say I might be a slow learner, but I just feel like you learn all the time. I have since then taken 3 more courses in holistic management. I sit on the board for Holistic Management Canada, and as of April of this year, have been elected as president. I have, in the last 2 years, been embarking on my journey to become a certified educator, and hope to complete that in the next several months. But this is the reason why we do what we do. I think it's really important to showcase our stories, our families, and the stories that go along with that, because without the stories, there really is no reason. So the reason why I do what I do is pictured here. A little bit about our ranch. It's about 4,200 acres, and it supports 3 families. So myself, my husband, his brother, and their parents. And we've been ranching together since 2002. We have about 700 cow-calf pairs. We're a long-yearling operation. We have an extra age heifer program, keep our own bulls, that kind of thing. And we have a really interesting land base with 3 soil types and lots of water. We're about a 5 on the brittleness scale. But the way that we operate in our business is we raise cows for beef. We also raise future ranchers, hopefully. We are We have a history of a lot of holistic management consulting. My father-in-law, Don Campbell, has been teaching holistic management for quite some time. We run an internship program, which is a 9-month program each year. We're involved in Holistic Management Canada, have lots of grazing field days, and we have a very active holistic management club. But this is what's really important, is that our business is driven by our goal. So for those of you familiar with holistic management, you know that it's a 3-part goal-based decision-making framework, and we use that. And that sort of manifests itself in many ways, but we've divided a division of responsibilities on our ranch, and we have an incredible meeting schedule that we follow most of the time, not all the time. But that's what helps makes us successful: the goal, the responsibilities, and the meetings. This isn't for you to read. I know it's really small, but I share this in every presentation that I do. It's our 3-part goal. And the places that I want to direct your attention to are the bold face print on either side. We are striving for excellence by being the best we can be in people, land, and finances. And to the right is that we will leave the land better than we found it. And it's those two things that really drive our behaviors on our ranch and the things that we do in our broader community, and even on a, what I would consider, a global level. Here's that division of responsibilities that I was talking about. So in our relationship with the land and the water and the people, we have devised a system that sort of gives us an outline for success. And over the last 20 years, it has been very successful. Again, you don't need to read all of this. I'm just giving you an example of the things that help create success in our business. Hopefully you can see that screen. I know that your sun is in your eyes, but this is just a picture on Google Earth of our ranch. So up at the top, you can see the 2 large bodies of water. That's Greater Woolard Lake and Lesser Woolard Lake, and the Beaver River. So this picture is our ranch, minus the corners that aren't ours. That's in the middle, and I'll give you a better picture of that. But I wanted you to see all those dark areas of water, the Oxbow Lakes. And I know this picture isn't great, but I put it up there for a reason. This is actually the copy of the map that's laminated that we use to develop our grazing system, our planned grazing, and that our interns carry around for fence lines. So as you can see, the lakes are again up at the top, and you can see the river that runs. It's 8.5 miles of actual water frontage on that river. And the red is all of our fence lines. So there's 104 pastures there that we use for our grazing systems. And you can see in a good year, and this map was taken, the aerial photo was taken in a good year, all of the Oxbow Lakes are full of water. So every pasture, 104 pastures, has access to water within about anywhere from 100 yards to a quarter of a mile is the farthest that a cow would have to walk. This is the view from my kitchen window. And what I want to describe to you is that this is what it would look on a typical year. This is in a late summer, and you can see lots of willows, lots of open grass. We have quite a few wooded or treed pastures as well. This is what it looked like last year. The entire map that I showed you, with the exception of where our infrastructure is and our 3 homes, was completely underwater from June 18th for about 3 solid weeks. All we used were boats. And that water is, you can see off to the right, a little dinghy. That's my husband and our intern going to check the cows in a boat. We did that for about 4 weeks straight. Again, this is what it is supposed to look like. A lot of water, folks. These are going to be, it's a different setup. I don't think, anyway, we're going to go with this. There's people, land, livestock, and finances are the areas that we focused on to get us through these really difficult times. And I'm going to talk more about that in the roundtable discussions, because there's a lot of details there, but I believe that those are the things that help make us very successful in getting through both flood and drought. So for some reason, It just stopped advancing. Oh, I guess we'll go right to there, and I'm going to pass it on. I think we just, kind of blew by those. But this picture, what I wanted to demonstrate was we got 4 inches of rain this year in total. And we are normally a lot more than that. I would say 15 to 18 inches. And going from an extreme flood, which virtually is a drought because we don't have access to any of our pastures. This is me monitoring our open meadows with 4 inches of rain. And I can't believe the amount of grass that we had. As hard of a year as we've had, the grass that we were able to procure was still amazing. So I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later and tie the concepts of weaving land, water, and people together. And for right now, I'll pass it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sarah Parmar, and my day job is as Director of Conservation for a group called Colorado Open Lands. We're a statewide land trust, as you can guess, in the state of Colorado. And the crudest measure of what we do is acres. So in terms of acres, we have protected a little over 500,000 acres across Colorado. But the story of success, I would say, is not in acres. It's in community and in land stewardship. So I will talk to you a little bit more about my work, but I want to tell you first about who I am is really shaped by where I came from. And I grew up on a ranch in southeastern Arizona, sort of southwestern New Mexico. Really, I like to think of it as the land of 4 states, Arizona, New Mexico, Sonora, and Chihuahua. My parents' home is less than 4 miles from the international border, which people in that community are very aware of how arbitrary that line is. But unfortunately, it's become a lot more solidified lately. But of course, as we've talked about, there are many people who came before my family. Most recently before my family were the Apache peoples. And as my dad says, he believes that this land belongs to the spirit of anyone who has been shaped by that wild, harsh, beautiful place. It's a place that I always think it's ironic that a lot of my work is around water in Colorado because I grew up with very little water. The opposite of Bluesette, our place, we carefully measure every drop of water, and I would say joy is measured in hundredths of an inch. And it's measured in these little rock pools, which we carefully assess each year, ride daily to see how much water is in the pools that can sustain our livestock and the wildlife that we share the land with. It's a place of great joy for me. This is my father and my son on the ranch. But it's a place that I didn't know if I wanted to go back to. And that's because I grew up really aware of the stress. It's a place of great joy and it's a place of great pain. And I was running away from that harshness for a long time. But I've realized that a lot of that stress comes from what I would say is one of the more toxic elements of cowboy culture, which is the idea of rugged individualism. And the thing that made me realize that I wanted to go back was something that happened in 2013. I was a little less than 2 weeks away from giving birth to my son. It was Thanksgiving of 2013. And I got a call. I was in Colorado, in Denver, where I live. And my mom said, "Your dad is being air-vac'd to the hospital right now. He had had an accident on a horse. We do all of our work on horseback. We don't have any machines. And the horse had reared up and fallen back on top of him, and the saddle horn crushed his sternum, punctured his lungs, and I was dealing with a lot of uncertainty at that point, and I was totally helpless. I couldn't travel back. I couldn't help. I couldn't do anything. And it was our community that stepped up and stepped in to take care of my family's land while my dad was in the hospital. They made sure that our animals were fed and watered and healthy, and they kept our place alive. And this is a hard time. You know, my other favorite, Sarah, alluded to it earlier. You know, we are carrying so much right now as a society, coping with a lot of our failures and a lot of our divisiveness and a lot of ugliness. And it's easy to forget right now what we as people are capable of. But I think that I show this picture. This is my son now this year. Some of those were when he was younger. But this child carries a lot already as a not quite 8-year-old. You know, he juggles 2 households. He juggles 2 cultures. And this is a child who, at 4 years old, rejected the idea of Santa Claus. He is highly skeptical. When he asks me if the world is going to be okay because he feels climate change, there's no way that he's going to accept a simple, it's going to be fine, because he doesn't accept the simple version of hope, as Bill DuBois spoke about. He does have hope, though, because he's learning about the power of community. He's learning that in the dark times, when he doesn't know what to believe, there are a group of people who can surround him with love and holds that space for him. And I think we all need a reminder of that kind of hope that Bill spoke about, which is in the power of community. And so I want to tell you a little bit about 2 different communities that I've gotten to work with, that I've been blessed to work with in Colorado as part of my work there. So this is a community in the upper Rio Grande Basin, the south central part of Colorado, the San Luis Valley. And when I first started working in land conservation, I got to meet members of this community who were very skeptical of people outside of their community for very good reason. But this community is really unique. You can probably barely see on the aerial the type of land settlement. So it's found here in New Mexico as well. There are these very narrow extensiones or vara strips. And the way that this land was settled by these people, in this case under a Mexican land grant, was based on the idea that everybody needed access to water. So there are these long, narrow parcels so that as many people as possible can have adjacency to that water, to that source of life. And acequia is an Arabic word. It means water bearer. But the acequia system is much more than a means of water delivery. It's a philosophy about life, about the connectedness of water and land and people, which says that they shouldn't be separated, that they all work together in tandem, and that in times of scarcity, scarcity should be shared. There should be enough water for every person, and not only for the people, but for the trees and for the fish as well. So it's a really beautiful place and philosophy. It's not perfect. People don't sit around singing Kumbaya, but they work at it. They're willing to do the hard work of community. And these people found their community and their culture being threatened. There were people moving in from outside. The land and water was being sold separately. And so I began working with them in 2010 and said, you know, what can I add? You know, can I listen to your concerns and take that and help you do something? There we go. And this is just some of the beauty of that community. But we started hosting what had been going in New Mexico for a while, but we started the first Colorado Congreso de Acequias in 2012 to create a space for people to talk about their hopes and fears of the future and to start visioning together about what they could do as a community to keep what they had. And we began working with people who said, you know, we're afraid of losing our water, but we can't afford water attorneys. We can't pay people $500-600 an hour to work with us. And so we worked with University of Colorado Law School to create a legal assistance program to provide free legal help. And we also created a handbook so that people felt empowered with the awareness of what the laws were, to help shape them as well. And then we, as a land trust, began placing conservation easements on these properties. People in the land trust community, the conservation community, God bless us, we love to see things connected to each other on maps. We like nice, neat things that work together. But when we think about protecting water, we did it a little bit differently in this community. Instead, we focused on properties that were at the end of each ditch, so that if somebody went to change a water right on that ditch, we as the land trust could say, we are going to stand right next to you, community, and defend this water right with you in court. And so we will be your long-term partner in helping protect this community. Very briefly, I will also just say that on the other side of the valley, the western side of the valley, the headwaters of the Rio Grande, the community is also coming together to face a huge challenge, which is an unsustainable aquifer. And unlike other parts of Colorado where people have kind of struck out in their own rowboats, trying to replace stream depletions, trying to save water and figure out how they're going to adapt to using less water, this community within these blobs on the map said, you know, we're going to tie our fates together. We're going to create a flotilla and join our little rafts, and we're going to try to solve our problems as community, as people living here with a vested stake here. And we are now working with this community and a local land trust on a new concept of groundwater-focused conservation easements. So how can we use a traditional tool and reimagine it for a new purpose? How do we break down these silos of land conservation over here and water over here? And I think this is just the first silo that needs to come down. There are so many others. And the question that I want to leave you with today is, how do we tap into the power of community, and how do we actively work in this hard time that we find ourselves in regenerating our communities to tap into the creativity that we need to shape a water future for all? And to me, the answer lies here in ourselves first. And in case you can't read this, I'm just going to read it out for you, because this all has a spiritual component for me, and whether it's God or whether it's the power of community and something larger than yourself. Here's the prayer that I like to say most days. Oh God, keep us from all pettiness. Let us be large in thought, in word and deed. Let us be done with fault-finding and leave off all self-seeking. May we put away all pretense and meet each other face to face without self-pity and without prejudice. May we never be hasty in judgment and always generous. Let us take time for all things and make us grow calm, serene, and gentle. Teach us to put into action our better impulses, to be straightforward and unafraid. Grant that we may realize that it is the little things that create differences, that in the big things of life, we are as one. And oh Lord, let us not forget to be kind. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to Darryl.
Oh, good. Then it'll work. Good to be up here with this panel today. I come from the land further east. It's a land of aridity, as we heard today. It's also a land where we have a magical thinking, and that is that our water will last forever. And it won't, and not the way we're going now. So I'm executive director of Ogallala Commons. It's my 19th year. So one of the things we do is something I've heard about already. We have a community-based intern program for interns in 5 states, working with all kinds of different organizations to get work experience and also skill development, but most importantly for our mission, to also discover there are ways to come back to their communities or their regions if they choose, and then creating those pathways through those internships. Another thing that's real basic to Ogallala Commons is 12 Key Assets of Commonwealth, and you can't read those, but they're on our website. These 12 key assets exist in any community. I'm in a community of 300 people. These would be the same 12, any state, any nation, any metro neighborhood, these 12 key assets. So this has been real important and very engaging for young people, but older people as well. This is what we're really up against where I live. It's under the ground, it's groundwater. So the Ogallala, High Plains Ogallala Aquifer, over the lands that overlay it, 30% of U.S. agricultural production. That's part of the good news. The bad news is rapidly depleting aquifer, the largest freshwater aquifer in the world. And where I live, people tell stories about, the 1930s. You could dig a windmill, hand dig a well, 30 feet down and hit water. So when my wife and I dug a house well, 325 feet. So the aquifer is depleting, and yet, wow, we have dairies, massive dairies coming in now, and massive this, massive that. So the amazing thing is we grew up in this country, but the part of the answer of what recharges the aquifer is all around us. I don't know how well you can see these slides, but those little blue dots, they look very tiny, but those are 80,000 blue dots over the top of the aquifer. Those are playas, Spanish word meaning beach, but they're really, they're seasonal wetlands. So in the so-called flat land, it's really not flat, it's divoted, like little divots everywhere. So we're between Amarillo and Lubbock, Texas, there's 1 per square mile. There are a lot. So that massive blue part down at the bottom, but they exist in western Colorado, eastern Colorado, eastern New Mexico, Nebraska, and Kansas as well. So amazingly, this is what nature has provided. This is what recharges the aquifer. But if you ask the average person, they'll just say, "That's a weed patch. That's land I wouldn't want to have. I can't farm it. What would I do with it?" So least desirable land. And isn't that the irony? Something that we don't desire is the key to recharging the aquifer. So where I live in the panhandle of Texas, where you have the most depletion, that's also where we have the most playas. So you'd think, okay, we'll figure this out and we'll take good care of these playas. The sad truth is 70% of them have a road through them, have topsoil erosion in them, and they're largely not functioning. So they get wet when there's a wet time, which is what's supposed to happen, but the recharge isn't that great. So we have a huge task. We could restore these playas. A lot of them could be restored. So that's really what I want to just talk about a little bit here. So if we're willing to live within a water budget and not think that we can have corn and all these things that grow in other places that are rain-fed much better than they grow where we have to pump groundwater, then the aquifer could be sustained, could be recharged. So what makes a playa a playa? Is it just any old place where the water gathers? Well, again, these exist, vernal pools from rainfall. They exist all over the world. What makes the playas what they are is clay, a clay basin. So they're dry a lot. It's true. But when they get wet, that clay basin has been dry and big cracks are formed, so that when there is a flooding event, that water can go through those cracks for the first 24 to 36 hours. And then what clay does, of course, is it expands, and those cracks they go shut. They're sealed up. But that's what allows the water to hold. If it was sand, it wouldn't do that. But clay is the key. So you have wet and dry cycles, and that's as it's supposed to be. So I'm always fascinated and waiting for the day when our local playa will refill. So I've been living back in the community since 2002. I probably have seen 10 refills. It's not every year. One time it took 4 years. Okay, so that's what people will say. Well, they're great if they would get wet more often, but it's just not the way it works. But when they do, look at all that water. Flooding events coming down the bar ditches, filling that playa, and they're really shallow. I mean, a full one, like I'm about to show you, that looks like a lot of water. You could walk across it and it would never go above your ankle. Okay, your knee. They're just really shallow. They're like saucers. But it creates this whole world of life. And again, after the recharge in the center is finished, there's recharges on the edges too. And then all the macroinvertebrates. I mean, this is the source of food chain. These are all macroinvertebrates, tadpole shrimp. Who knew we had shrimp? Not the kind you'd have in a restaurant, but real important to all the toads and the amphibians that will come in the playa. And all this is short term. It'll be over in about 8 to 12 weeks. And eggs are laid, the dryness comes back, and it's all set up for the next time. Shorebirds as well. So then, of course, those wet soils will dry out and the cracking starts again. And it's normal and natural and part of what makes all this work. And as months go by and seasons go by, the cracks get wider. I had one in here, but I took it out because I thought I had too many slides of the kid putting his leg down the crack. We do these playa festivals where we have elementary students, and we go out to see a playa. And this is really important because you would think that we grew up and we know all about this. I knew about them at one point because I was interested in hunting. So it's like, oh, a duck's on a wet playa. But no one ever told me about recharge or anything like that. In fact, I didn't know about recharge, I think, till 10 years ago. So if I don't know, think of how many other people have never really heard this. But yeah, they get huge cracks. So if you ever take the time to walk out in a basin like that, you'll see a dry one has cracks. And that's normal and natural because someday, maybe next year, maybe another 2 years, there'll be a flooding event, and that's how the water begins to go back on the long trip down to the aquifer. And you might say, well, if you've got 300 feet down to the water table, how is it ever going to get there? So you hear people say, okay, 50 years, it'll take 50 years to get down to the aquifer. But that's not true either. As Wayne knows from our field day last week in Hereford with Chris Grotegoot, he's getting recharge within the year, much quicker. So again, it's all about land management and about deep-rooted grasses and how the uplands are, not just the wetland, but playas could do a lot for us, and it's the thing that I wanted to leave you with for today. So what Ogallala Commons does also is we have field days. So that is at Chris Grotegoot's place outside of Hereford, and where he's got really good records through the local groundwater district of aquifer rising. And this is unheard of. I used to come to this conference 10 years ago to be inspired by people who didn't live around me, who were restoring land and things like that, and say, what do we have? Well, we have a lot of people who are, depleting the aquifer. Finally someone in my locality who's actually raising the aquifer. Okay? Well, one of the things is they're not growing corn anymore. They've gone to pasture-based systems. They're making that transition towards a rain-fed agriculture. You need all those things as well. Playas putting water back into the aquifer isn't just a magic bullet by itself. It's part of a bigger approach. But it's just ironic that over all this massive aquifer in the middle of the country, there are also these ways to recharge it because, for a long time people thought there's going to be no end to the water. And then there was another time when people said, well, you know, it came off the Rocky Mountains 10 million years ago, and what we got is what we got. There's no way to put new water into it. So it's interesting where we've gotten to today, but this is part of what I would talk to you about on weaving together water and people. So I'm going to turn it back to Bluesette.
So one of the opportunities that is very unique in this conference is that we get to speak today, but then we get to talk together tomorrow in the roundtable, the bear pit session, if you will, or what I might refer to as a firing squad, because I'm sure you're going to have some really difficult questions for us tomorrow. And so what we decided as a panel was to come up with some topics that we thought would be very interesting to discuss with you tomorrow. And we each have a little bit of some statements or personal thoughts that we have on these topics, but we're going to pose a question to you. And then we ask or challenge you to really think them over in the next 24 hours. And when we get to our roundtables tomorrow, that you've also given it some thought, and so that our discussion can be even more informed. So we're each going to take a topic. The topic I chose is around water planning and water as part of the whole. And in an effort to stay within our time limit, I'm only going to give you a minute or two of what I think about it. And I'm going to let these two also give a little bit of their perspective. And then we'll end with a question for you to think about. And then Darryl and Sarah will both do the same. So water planning, I really wanted to challenge folks to think about what would happen if we began to plan water like we do our finances, and careful attention to our finances. But I want to talk first about how water is just being one part of a whole system. In holistic management, we talk about ecosystem processes, and water is one of them. A mineral cycle, or the nutrients and how they cycle, is another. And energy and how we capture solar energy is also another one. And then dynamics or biodiversity is another. So water is simply one part of that system. If we all convince the rest of the world to just focus on water, we'd still have issues. We cannot look at it in a silo. It must be connected and part of a whole. So on our ranch, as you saw, last year, we live in the floodplain of the Beaver River. We know that it will flood from time to time. We have systems in place to safeguard against major floods. We were a little blindsided last year, granted. But we have flood reserves. We have reserves in knowledge and pastures that we can rely on. But we know that it isn't just about focusing on the water, that we focus on many other things like the people and the economics behind it to help give us a whole picture. So I'm going to pass it over to, are you second? Yep. Pass it over to Sarah to have you give her thoughts, and then we'll end with a question after Darryl.
Thanks, Bluesette. So we talked a little bit earlier about scale, and when I think of water planning and holistic thought, I just think about how water is the great connector, because it moves through, these meaningless boundaries that we put on maps, and it connects across property lines. It connects across state lines. It connects all of these communities and people across the way. And so I think that, as Bluesette said, we each have a role to play in our little dot on that map. But we also, I think, need to think about, as we plan, how that water connects all of us. And I think that Darryl is showing that at that regional scale of the Ogallala Commons. So I'm going to let him give his thoughts.
I just want to add in that we're in a time now where this whole idea of water planning is the ideal of, I'll get mine and you can deal with what's left. So I don't know any large city where I live, there aren't very many, but if there's any water, they want it. So the way our status quo approach right now is, we'll just use it up. I mean, even if you ask groundwater districts, the thought would be, we really can't preserve the aquifer, but we could have managed depletion. So that really makes people want to move back and build a lifestyle, don't you think? Yeah, we'll have managed depletion. So the first thing for us would be in water planning is, can we live within our water budget? Can we live within what the land and the surroundings give us? And I think that's something we're going to have to work a whole lot on, because again, the idea now is if you have money, you can go get this water, but then where does that leave the land, the creatures, and everybody else? So we're not sustaining, we're getting smaller and smaller, and there's less and less equity. So a water plan, first of all, planning would be about how can we plan so that everyone would have water and that we have it for the ones who come after us as well.
So the question that I'd like to leave with you around this particular idea is, what role do you play? What scale, what scope? And when we talk about a water plan, or what part in that water plan as part of a bigger whole do you play? So think about that, and we'll get back to that question tomorrow, hopefully, if you join us in the round table. And Sarah's going to talk about relationships with water. Ooh.
Yeah, I didn't coordinate with Sarah Wenzel-Fisher this morning, but she brought up relationship with water, and that was kind of the topic that I chose. And, I said it in my presentation earlier. I said water challenges. And we think of a future with water challenges, but our challenge isn't with water. Pretty sure Mother Nature has more of a beef with us than we do with her. Our challenge revolves around our relationship with each other and our relationship with water. And I think a lot of that challenge comes from a brokenness of relationship, a lack of attunement to that connectedness. And when I think about how we heal relationships and gain perspective, for me personally, the only way that I can really truly change my perspective or my relationship with somebody or within myself is finding an alignment of my head and my heart. So it's not throwing out the data. It's not taking away that value of perspective. But to me, it's bringing back a little bit of the magic and a little bit of the awe and a little bit of the humility. And it's the difference between looking at a river system on Google Earth and going and putting my fingers in the Rio Grande, and the feeling that gives me, and the sense of awe and remembrance. And so for me, it's finding both of those things. And I think valuing where other people are in that journey, but helping them find that head and heart connection to repair those relationships. And I can't remember who wanted to go next. Darryl?
Yeah, I'm going to leave you for the last words of wisdom on this topic, So relationship, and it's a really packed word. I think it probably triggers a lot of us when we talk about the word relationship, because it means we're actually involved in some way, and when we're involved, then we also can be quite vulnerable. Things that come to mind around relationship and water, I think it's really important to look at the language that we use. So our relationship as humans and the use of water on Earth has language around it that comes with a lot of baggage. So when you consider the term water right, what do you think about? That maybe I have a right to water. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm in no place to say that that's wrong. But what I ask is that how does that help you frame your thoughts around water and how you participate with that? So what would have happened if in our collective lives, if it wasn't called a water right? Like, I own this water. I have the right since 1948 or whatever the right is. What if it was called water privilege? And I don't mean to bring in a whole bunch of stuff about privilege, because I know that that's a bit of a trigger word in society, but if it was considered a privilege to have water, would we have done things differently? So I really think that language has a way of shifting the way we think about water. And perhaps we all bring our own paradigms about our relationship with water. And then I'll just leave with our relationship with water may need to change in order for us to get to where we want to go. And change can be really scary. It doesn't have to be, but we think it is. And so maybe we can think that the change actually brings opportunity and a greater level of understanding, and not necessarily just fear, chaos, turmoil, and all the words we associate with it. Take it away, Darryl.
So the word I hear a lot about water is it's a commodity. So something that you buy and sell and appropriate out to the users. So I would like to, understanding that's part of our world, but the primary thing I would like to get to is, again, water as life, or water as source. Water is something that ties together those 12 key assets that I showed you earlier that maybe you couldn't see very well. But so what I try to do in my life, first of all, is to let water live through me, in me. So it's easy to turn on a faucet or to turn on the well, but I like to create opportunities with water that falls from the sky and putting that back in so that water would move through me and move through the people around me so that we could all have water. And that's one of the ways that I would see relationship with water. Am I supposed to ask the question? Okay, good, because I don't know it.
Sure. So the question, I think the food for thought for tomorrow is, what happens, what shifts when we do think of water as a privilege and we think of our part and our relationship with water differently maybe than a water right, but a water privilege. And then I'm going to turn it over to Darryl for the last topic.
So what can we do that everyone could have water? So two ways I do this. One is I alluded to a little bit earlier. I know this is not the same in every state about rainwater harvesting, but what I see around me is I don't see smaller houses or smaller roofs. I see the roofs getting bigger all the time. In the village, the biggest roofs are the school and the church. We just have the Catholic Church. Those roofs, if we harvested them, because they're all guttered, and if we just would use that water to handle the landscaping that are part of those two entities, because you got the football field in there, right? And the lawns and the church. We even watered the cemetery. It's a native grass, but yeah, we watered because Germans like a good-looking cemetery. Yeah, it's really important. Well, so let's say we're not going to drink that water, but if we could just take the landscaping off the system, that would help our public water supply tremendously. And I think I'm not wrong on this statistic nationwide for the U.S. anyway, that it's not like we're drinking all this water. We're just, again, pumping it all on corn. But per capita, most water is used, 60%, for landscaping, whether it's El Paso, Texas, more desert, or a more high rainfall area. So I just look at all these roofs, and I look at my own roof, and I say, well, I'm going to take this water, and I'm going to capture it. And it's not a little bit of water. we have a house and a barn, but that's producing about, I don't know, in a wet year when there's 18 inches of rain, I think I'm capturing 50,000 gallons of water. That's as much as the water tower in the village. So what I do with that, grow food that I could have on the well, and it's a little bit of a work. I have to move the pump around and this kind of thing, but it's just one way for me to create some equity, some water equity, and water for all. And I would just propose that other idea too, for where we can, to harvest our footprint and use that water for landscaping and not use the groundwater, not use the public water.
I know we're probably over time, so I'm going to be really brief. And my thoughts around this are that for those of us that are here, or we're sort of preaching to the choir, you're probably already thinking about these things. I think it's probably essential that we not only connect people in urban areas to the land, but also to their relationship with water, and that capturing whatever area, the parking lots at Walmart's, and I'm not just picking on Walmart, I just mean that there's areas where the collection is extremely important, and so that can be all part of the water plan. Sarah, do you want to? And then Darryl, you're asking the question? Okay, and we're just about going to wrap it up.
I'll just keep mine brief too, but when I think about water equity, I think about the fact that, at least in the state of Colorado, water is very much associated with the power dynamic, and there are people who are in the position of power making decisions about the future of water, and there are a lot of people who don't have a voice in that. And so when I think about how we shape our water future, I think about whose voice is being left out of the room. And I want to thank Corrine. I don't know if she's listening, but thank you. Your words were such a gift this morning when you said, just ask. If you have the good intentions, invite me to your land, invite me to the table. And so I challenge us all to think about, who do we need to invite to the table as we shape our water future.
So the question we want to leave for us to think about tomorrow or today would be, in what ways are we water consumers? But conversely, in what ways are we water distributors, water producers? Because we're both. So what are the ways that I'm a water consumer, but also what ways am I a water distributor, a water provider? And I think that's it for us.
So I think we have time for a couple of questions. We do have a virtual question, which is our first virtual question. So we're going to ask the question from the virtual audience.
Well, first of all, I don't know if you all know, but we're live streaming this whole thing to a virtual audience. If everyone could give a big hello to everyone out there, they can hear you. Thank you. Yeah. Real people, virtual space. So the question from the audience is, how do you rebuild the relationship with water in urban and ag? Interpret that the way. Yeah. Cool.
Well, I think that's exactly what we were touching on, or what I was touching on, is about getting urban people connected. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, urban people thinking that agricultural people are the demise of everything in many ways, and how dysfunctional that is when they're actually supplying the food and stewarding the land for all. But I think that, and when I mean agriculture, I mean very broad. Everyone who is living off the land. Connecting people from urban to agrarian is much more than just water. And I believe the answer is in telling the story. Everyone has a story. Whether you live on the land or in a high rise, you still have a connection. And some people need to be reminded of what that connection is. And often it is through food, and thank goodness everyone needs food. So we all have some common ground to start telling the story.
One thing that we've done for 12 years is have festivals, Playa Festival, to take kids out, because they know more in school about the rainforest, generally, than they know about playas, which are in their backyard. So making these things tangible where people can touch them, these sources of water, would be part of the way I would see rebuilding the relationship.
There's a hand in the back.
Hi, I won't be able to do the roundtable tomorrow because I'll be doing another one. And I have some really technical questions because I do water science stuff. So I have some for you, Darryl, later about the EPT and the IBI index and the subsidence issues. But I wanted to say, sort of from a more general perspective, that I'm wondering about when you're talking about how water is being treated as a commodity, how do we change that paradigm? Because water has memory. You know, water carries energy with it. It picks up the minerals. It knows where it's been, and it carries a memory of everywhere it's been, everyone that it's touched. It comes within our bodies. It gets recycled, so there's bits of our ancestors are in that water and in the soil. And there's this use it or lose it kind of water rights in this country where it encourages people to overuse water, to not treat water as an integral part of our lives, but to treat it as a commodity. And how do we change that paradigm?
Yeah, that it, again, it's more than a commodity, that it's life. I guess I'm always amazed. I don't live in a big city, but even like in Amarillo or Lubbock, you can use a lot of water for pennies. You know, there's no, I think I heard this somewhere, some cities, like then you get over 1,000 gallons and then the price of that water goes up. So I know that sounds again like commodifying, but just that we put more value on water would be one little simple thing that we could reflect in how we pay for it.
Yeah, I studied water resource economics in college, and that's what I have my master's in. And so it's tempting, I think, to go to that price model, and I think that is something that speaks to a lot of people. And so I don't want to discount that, but I studied the type of economics that is where do markets fail, you know, where do they not serve us? And I think that you know, what you said is really beautiful, and I think that it starts with telling stories. I think that the more that we remember, again, that holisticness, that connectedness, that relationship, Bluesette spoke to the language that we use, and I want to thank everybody here with an Indigenous voice for helping me to see things differently, because you know, you're not preaching to the choir. I still have so much to learn, and I would say to unlearn. And the community that I grew up in, we were unlearning the colonial view of fire and fire suppression, and we were rebuilding our relationship with fire and reintroducing it, and working with it and appreciating its role in the ecosystem, as again Corrine spoke to earlier. And so I think that we have a lot to unlearn about our relationship with water, and I do think that comes from hearing different voices and different stories.